Millionaire caught his black daughter being humiliated in her own shop. Isota Diakite was not simply a young woman of 27, she embodied the legacy of a generational struggle, a quiet strength marked by perseverance, wisdom, and dignity. Although her beauty was undeniable, it was her manner of being, her ability to shine with her intelligence and her natural charisma that most impressed those who met her. The daughter of one of the most influential businessmen in the country, she did not live in her father's shadow, but had established herself in areas where black women, and especially young women, were still marginalized. She was living proof that you could defy social expectations and redefine the rules of the game. From a young age, Isota had witnessed the sacrifices and victories of her father, a man whose hands had forged an empire through the sweat of his brow, in the face of a world that often closed doors to him because of the color of his skin. His father, a man of unwavering rigor, had taught him that dignity and humanity were a person's greatest assets, and that excellence was not measured by the number of possessions one possessed, but by the quality of the actions one undertook. Today, Isota was in one of her own luxury boutiques, a place that she had built with her own hands, a space of refinement where each object had been selected with meticulous standards. The boutique, located in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, exuded discreet luxury. The dark wood furniture, carefully carved, contrasted harmoniously with the impeccably aligned shelves. The pieces of fine jewelry, like inaccessible treasures, sparkled under the dim lighting, each of them containing a story of mastery and perfection. The polished marble floor reflected the elegance of the place, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and sumptuous. Isota crossed this space with a serenity that was her own, a calm that belied the inner strength that she had cultivated over the years. She wasn't here by chance. Today, she was not only the owner of a successful business. She was above all a girl who came to pay homage to her father. The one who, against all odds, had raised her in a world that often tried to tell her that she didn't belong. This gesture, that of finding the perfect gift, was symbolic. A way to remind him and herself that everything she had accomplished was not a simple matter of luck, but the fruit of hard work, iron will, and unwavering integrity. She approached a particularly delicate display case, where the collector's watches that she cherished were displayed. Each model represented more than a simple object. It was a work of art, a testimony of human genius. But more than anything, a Patek Philippe watch was a symbol of perfection. She had dreamed of it for years, but it wasn't a simple purchase. It would be a gift for her father, a way of telling him that he was, for her, the embodiment of the excellence that he had taught her. As she was about to ask one of the employees for assistance, she immediately felt the tension in the air. The store, usually a haven of calm, today seemed suffocated by a heavy atmosphere. A saleswoman, a blonde woman in her 30s, who seemed almost too well coiffed for this kind of environment, stared at her briefly. Her smile was polite, but tinged with an icy distance, as if Isota was just another customer, with no history or particular value. "Can I help you?" asked the saleswoman, but her tone betrayed a palpable underestimation, as if his gaze was already fixed on Isota's simple but elegant style, and he saw nothing exceptional in it. Isota was not the type to let this kind of behavior destabilize her. She knew that her appearance, while impeccable, perhaps did not correspond to the stereotypes of usual customers of this type of store. The others, the rich heirs or the wives of influential businessmen, often arrived in flashier, more ostentatious outfits. Isota preferred simplicity. She had never believed that you should shine by what you wore, but by what you were. And yet, this attitude, although solid and anchored, did not spare the judgments of those who were ready to judge without looking beyond appearances. "I'm looking for a particular watch. A Patek Philippe, with a leather strap," she replied calmly, her tone unambiguous. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't going to be swayed by the saleswoman's tacit judgment. The saleswoman scrutinized her for a moment, her eyes slowly descending from Isota's head to her feet, seeming to detect a sort of indignity in her appearance, in her manner of being. His gaze lingered for a fraction of a second too long on Isota's clothes, as if the simplicity of her outfit did not suit the place. "We have several models, but I doubt this kind of part will be in your budget," the saleswoman replied in a slightly condescending tone, with that painful familiarity that betrayed the ease with which she judged people's worth based on what they were wearing. Isota discreetly gritted her teeth. She had experienced this type of remark, this rapid and unfounded judgment, many times. People tended to believe that a young black woman, without sparkling jewelry or a designer dress, had neither the culture nor the means to appreciate true luxury. But Isota knew better. She knew that true luxury was not measured by what one possessed, but in the appreciation of art, beauty, and mastery. She knew that elegance lay in the ability to choose what was rare, what was precious, without needing to shout it to everyone. "I'm well aware of the prices, thank you. I know exactly what I'm looking for," she replied, with a quiet authority that echoed her experience in this world where appearances often played a determining role. The saleswoman, apparently annoyed, just sighed before responding in a falsely polite manner. "I'll show you some models." But Isota, determined not to let herself be destabilized, approached the window she had spotted and, with a measured gesture, she opened the door to take out the watch she coveted. The saleswoman, visibly upset by the gesture, hesitated for a moment before responding in a drier tone. "This one is a very rare piece. It is reserved for very special clients. I recommend these models to you instead." The words were spoken in a deliberately condescending tone. Isota felt stung, as if a glimmer of aggression had come to disrupt the neat and refined atmosphere of the store. Why did people still feel entitled to judge her? Why this incessant need to reduce her to a preconceived image, to a stereotype, simply because of the color of her skin or her discreet posture? It was as if her presence in this very place, a place where wealth and luxury seemed to be elevated to divinities, already made her suspect, almost unworthy. But it wasn't the first time she faced such stares. And it probably wouldn't be the last. These kinds of small daily humiliations, these hasty judgments based on superficial appearances, had been part of his existence for too long. But there was a point where Isota, despite her inner greatness and self-control, felt tired. She felt like people always wanted to box her into a role that didn't belong to her, to reduce her identity to just a box they could check. The role of the ambitious young woman, certainly, but also that of the black woman who should, according to their logic, have been content to remain on the fringes of luxury, content to dream, rather than conquer it. She then slowly turned her head towards the saleswoman. This time, her gaze was no longer that of a customer looking for a simple transaction. It had a quiet but implacable firmness, a burst of dignity that came when the line of patience was crossed. Her body straightened slightly, and in a slow but confident gesture, she crossed her arms, daring the saleswoman to persist in her condescending attitude. "I asked you for the Patek Philippe watch. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. If you can't find it, I'd be grateful if you could call me someone else." The tension rose instantly. The exchange, which had started out as superficial politeness, had now become a confrontation. Around them, the other customers seemed to hesitate, sensing the change in the atmosphere. Some, feeling uncomfortable, looked away, as if not wanting to get involved in what was clearly becoming a moment of visible discomfort. Others, more daring, cast furtive glances at Isota, intrigued by the confrontation but unsure of their place in this silent power play. The saleswoman, visibly upset by Isota's insistence, hesitated for a moment. Then, in a hasty gesture, she turned to a colleague, muttering something under her breath before glancing at another customer, as if the fate of this sale no longer mattered in the slightest. But Isota was not the type to allow herself to be silenced. She then moved with elegant fluidity towards the locked window, her gaze never leaving the saleswoman, her attitude unyielding. With a confident gesture, she opened the display case herself, opening it with an ease that betrayed her perfect knowledge of the place and the procedures. She picked up the watch carefully, placed it on the counter, and looked into her eyes again, a glint of challenge in hers. "I think you will be able to make the sale." The silence that followed this declaration was heavy. The saleswoman, whose face was slowly falling under the weight of humiliation, avoided Isota's gaze. She said nothing, but her face betrayed confusion and annoyance. She was overwhelmed by this situation which she did not expect. She had hoped for a docile customer, one who would not ask questions, who would simply buy what was offered to her, without discussing the price or rarity of the item. But Isota was not that kind of customer. She had learned to fight for what she wanted, to impose her own reality, without ever apologizing for existing in spaces where she had just as much right as anyone else. It was at this precise moment that the door to the shop opened again, causing the bell above to gently jingle. A man entered, a man whose elegance was immediately striking. His tailored suit was a work of art, cut with millimeter precision, and he walked with a confident, measured gait. But what was most striking was not simply the impeccable cut of his outfit nor the indisputable elegance of his appearance. It was the way he carried his calm, an unwavering serenity that exuded a natural authority, an indisputable presence. It was Mr. Diakite, Isota's father. The man who, with his hard work, determination and visionary spirit, had built a commercial empire that matched his ambitions. When he saw Isota, a bright smile appeared on his lips, immediately lighting up his face. He approached her with the warmth and tenderness of a proud father, spreading a hand which he placed gently on her shoulder. A simple gesture, but one that carried all the weight of the affection and respect he showed her.
My daughter, here you are.
The words were spoken with infinite tenderness, like a ray of sunshine piercing the clouds. He looked at her, and Isota, her heart beating faster than usual, let herself be absorbed by this moment. It was a moment of return to the source, a return to the love and recognition of a father-daughter relationship which, even in moments of tension and confrontation, remained the anchor of his life. The saleswoman, still in shock from the situation, stood there motionless, unable to react adequately. She was destabilized, not only by the turn of events, but also by the fact that her authority, so fragile until then, had just collapsed in an instant. She had acted impulsively, her judgment tinged with prejudice and a clear lack of respect, and it was now leading her to a reality she had not anticipated. His mind desperately searched for an escape, but Mr. Diakite's words resonated in the store like a clap of thunder. He had observed the scene with a calm eye, and within a few seconds, he cast an icy look at the employee, a look that called for no response but demanded a much deeper awareness of the situation. You just treated my daughter like a simple customer, without even knowing who she is, didn't you? He said calmly, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. The words fell, heavy with meaning, striking at the heart of the saleswoman who suddenly felt vulnerable. Absolute silence fell over the store, every whisper, every movement seemed suspended. The customers present, suddenly, became spectators of a rare and powerful moment, where the pride of a few collided brutally with the reality of authority and respect. Eyes focused on Mr. Diakite, some fascinated by his unwavering calm, others curious to know how the saleswoman would react to what she had just heard. The saleswoman stammered, nervousness palpable in her voice, her mind trapped in unease. But sir, I didn't know. She tried to explain, but her words were lost in the air, as if they were too weak to touch on the gravity of the situation. Mr. Diakite interrupted him in an icy manner, his voice leaving no room for defense, no escape. My daughter, Isota Diakite, is not only a customer, but also the co-owner of this store. She holds a significant share of the shares. You have just humiliated one of the most important people in this store.
A fatal error.
The words, carefully chosen and delivered with clinical precision, pierced the air like sharp swords. The saleswoman instantly turned pale, her face falling under the weight of the revelation. She hadn't just treated Isota with contempt, she had just committed a mistake that went beyond her simple professional relationship. The store itself was at stake, its reputation, its future, and all of that had been jeopardized by hasty judgment and ingrained prejudice. A shiver ran down her spine as she clumsily tried to justify herself, searching for words that, she knew, wouldn't be enough to repair what she had just broken. But Mr. Diakite, impassive, looked at her for a long time with a deeply disapproving look. He showed no mercy. He wasn't there to save her from her own defeat. He was there to impose fundamental respect. I advise you to apologize, and to understand that there are codes that are not learned in books, but in life. The tone was firm, but there was something in the way he spoke that transcended mere reprimand. He was not a man who sought to crush his interlocutor, but a man who wanted to make people understand that certain errors, certain humiliations, cannot be repaired simply with apologies. They require a change of perspective, a fundamental questioning of personal values. The silence that followed his words was heavy with meaning, and the saleswoman, trembling, finally resigned herself to formulating an apology, her words hesitant and clumsy. But in his eyes, Isota could read the truth. These apologies were not sincere. They were an attempt to save what could still be saved. Isota, whose dignity had never wavered during this confrontation, took a deep breath. Her father's look at her, full of respect and support, gave her the strength to express herself with unwavering clarity and firmness. She turned slowly to the saleswoman, her eyes shining with calm but deep determination. Humility does not come with money or power.
It comes from the heart.
And that, it is clear that you do not have it. The words were simple, but their impact was profound. They resonated in space, like an echo of ancient wisdom. Isota knew that true power did not lie in material goods, nor in wealth that could be purchased. True power lay in the ability to understand others, to treat each person with respect and dignity, regardless of their status or appearance. Mr. Diakite then placed a firm hand on his daughter's shoulder, a gentle but weighty gesture, as if to remind her of the importance of this lesson, but also of the paternal love that united them.
Come on, Isata, you're the one teaching now.
Whether here or elsewhere, elegance lies not only in what you wear, but in the way you treat others. Mr. Diakite's words were a nod to his daughter's intelligence and wisdom, but also to his own education. True elegance, he said, cannot be bought, it must be lived. It is in the respect we have for others, in the way we position ourselves in the world. The store, which had witnessed this unprecedented confrontation, understood that day a truth that few had realized. True wealth does not lie in the possession of goods, but in the way in which we raise others with dignity. At that very moment, there was not only a lesson being taught to the saleswoman, but also to everyone present, watching in silence. In this world where everything sometimes seemed governed by money and power, a moment of pure humanity had just emerged, reaffirming what was truly precious.